for coming in the middle of such a crazy time for everyone, and especially thank you to my alumni. It makes me happy to see your faces on here. Yay, I miss you all. Yeah, we just realized that we had so many smart people on this call that could tell you a little bit about some of the engagement work that they've been doing over the past 3 months or so. Meeting community information needs during a time when there's a coronavirus, then there's obviously major economic fallout from that. Now we have a major uprising against, racial injustice and police brutality. And so, engagement journalists are busy working on, trying to understand what ways that they can best serve communities during all of that. So, and these folks are all doing different things, but can share with you a little bit more about that. I won't talk too much. I feel like we can get to the more exciting stuff first. I'm happy to stay longer at the end if you have questions more about the nitty gritty of the program. But this is really what we're all about. We're all about engaging and serving communities in new ways. We've been questioning objectivity for a long time now as part of this program, and also some of the other traditional ways journalists have done work, because we really believe that there's a number of issues that just didn't get enough attention in mainstream media because we really weren't doing a good enough job listening to what people's needs and values were. So I'm happy to talk more about kind of that nitty gritty stuff later on, or individually. You can email me. There's all kinds of opportunities to do that. But I kind of want us to just get kicked off and hear from our alumni and one of our faculty members as well. And, we're also happy to take any questions in the chat, or if you'd like to introduce yourself as well, that's great. But we thought we'd just start out with giving everyone, 5 or so minutes to just tell us a little bit about themselves, their recent engagement work, or, possibly some of the things that they did while they were a student here. And that it might just give you, some new ideas about ways journalists could be working. So that's all I will say for now, since I'm the least interesting person here. And Melissa even made us slides, so that's pretty sweet. So yeah, Melissa, I'll let you say anything you need to hear. Whoever, I don't know who's going first, but yeah.
Sure. So welcome everybody. It's great to see you all here. As Carrie mentioned, we'll have a number of our amazing alums and also one of our professors as well speak a little bit about the work that they did while at the CUNY J School, and also the work that they're doing now in the newsrooms that they're working in. So lots of interesting ideas and engagement tips and trial and strategies from people doing this work now in newsrooms. So I have just a slide prepared for each person. I can share these with the group afterwards if you want to follow along or contact anyone for follow-up information. So each of our alums and Terry Paris Jr., our professor, will be speaking for a few minutes. If you have any questions, you can drop these in the chat and we'll have some time to chat towards the end of the call. So let me get us started here. So first we have Christine. So Christine, if you're ready, we'd love to hear a little bit about your work.
Great. Hi, I'm Christine. I am the audience engagement editor at the Center for Public Integrity. We're a nonprofit newsroom based in Washington, D.C. Right now, I'm working on a project looking at coronavirus-related hate in the Asian community. We're also now pivoting to kind of addressing anti-Blackness in the Asian community, which is a little bit more complicated. And I'm also working on a solutions-oriented story about progress and challenges with community-police relations.
Great. Christine, do you want to talk a little bit more about some of these tools and techniques that you've been using to crowdsource and learn more about these communities in your work?
Sure. So I think that it was a little bit challenging with the coronavirus related hate incidents, just because there were so many other organizations that were not journalism related that were also crowdsourcing. So we had tried to partner with a lot of people in order to get that off the ground. Right now, we've partnered with Next Shark, primarily for their Facebook group called Crimes Against Asians, to kind of inform our reporting efforts. So we had come out with a report that was cited by 16 senators to the DOJ, basically demanding for concrete steps to address hate related to coronavirus on a federal level. And that was pretty cool. I don't know where that is right now. There hasn't been any word on like whether or not that's moving forward in any kind of tangible way. But it was still pretty cool to see that impact. The solutions-oriented story that I am currently working on, can't really say much about it on the record. But I think that comes out of like a lot of feedback that we've been getting basically about like, where is the needle moving and is it moving at all? And I think that the needle is moving. We just need to look at certain places. And I think there's just so much going on right now in like news media that's kind of clogging up some of that narrative. So it's like also thinking about different ways that we could service our audiences by, I guess, providing information that they can actually use and need.
Great. And I think another thing that you mentioned just in our talk before this was about, you know, how you're serving this community through just covering what's going on in DC. You're based there. Obviously, there's a lot going on. What are some of those tools or strategies that you've used or coworkers and colleagues have used in covering what's happening?
Yeah, sure. So because we're in DC and that has been kind of in the spotlight for a while, we're also investigative. So I think one of the challenges in our newsroom that I had to kind of identify was like, how do we get the newsroom who's not really used to doing like daily beats to cover this in a way that is really quick? So one of the things that we did was kind of coordinate these like social media efforts and then launched the gallery kind of showing stuff that's on the ground with some context about the protests and how they had escalated and then de-escalated over the past week.
Great. And I'm gonna pivot to one more thing unrelated from your work now, but something that you did while at the CUNY-J school, because I think it was just a really interesting way and something we don't always hear about in terms of connecting with audiences. But I'm hoping maybe you can talk a little bit about the zine you did and sort of what community you covered while you were in school and how you focused on doing that work in kind of an interesting way.
Sure. So my community was the underground music scene in New York City. So a lot of these spaces are just like these underground spaces that are in like warehouses and in basements, and they're not really regulated and they're probably mostly illegal. But the thing is, a lot of these, like a lot of the landlords and stuff will know that these spaces are being used and they're not up to code. The catalyst for that wasn't just because like I really loved going to underground shows, and like I ended up questioning my own safety when I went to these shows after the Ghost Ship fire happened in California a few years ago. So Ghost Ship is this giant warehouse venue in California and there's a fire that had broken out that killed 35 people. So a lot of it was just kind of like, how could you, like the value that these underground spaces bring to New York City in terms of culture, but also at the time, New York City also launched like the office of the nightlife mayor, which would essentially act as like a liaison between the nightlife industry, including these like underground DIY spaces, and the rest of the city. So what I did was I created a zine because zines were just like this form of communication in the underground space already. And then I added a text-in feature to see if I could get some feedback and also just try to get metrics on circulation, because you can't really get those with print products. So yeah, that's basically what I did for my thesis.
Great. Thank you so much, Christine. So if anyone has questions for Christine, if you want to drop them in the chat, like I said, we'll have some time for Q&A towards the end. So thank you. All right, so next up we have Alexandria Sanford. So Lexi, tell us a little bit about your work.
Oh, had to unmute myself. So I am on the social media team at CBS This Morning, and that is a little all-encompassing. It's still very traditional social media, doing posts, and some graphics work. But the thing that I really like about what I'm doing now is that we really, I don't know like how to say like engage with the audience, but like we take what we use on the show and translate it into more social friendly bites. So like we'll have pieces that air on the show, but we'll cut them down and like maybe just take a little bit of sound out and make it more digestible for Instagram or other places. The one thing that I feel like as far as engagement work that we're doing currently is it was surrounding the coronavirus. And Anthony Mason, one of our anchors, every Friday is currently on hold, but he did a Lives to Remember segment where we highlighted people who we've lost to the pandemic. And that was, we would do a call out on the show and online just for people to email their loved one, and we would highlight them on the show. And we also did, and what you see on the slide is that we would also do highlights of them on Instagram, and that would be a gallery of just still photos, and that would be the same type of work you did for reporting on the show. Is just that it would be an Instagram gallery, and that way we could feature more people than we had the time, because clearly we lost a lot of people to the virus. So that's what I'm doing now. I can talk about a little bit of what I did in like when I was in the program. Was that what you meant?
Yeah, sure. That would be great. Like what I have here,
Yeah.
since you focus particularly on women who had been formerly incarcerated and did a lot of great and interesting work around that, and maybe talking a little bit about your spaceship media time as well.
Yeah. So the one thing I will say about the social journalism program is that is one thing that I guess renewed my passion for journalism, because I have been in journalism before, then I took some time away from the industry, and then I found this program that really focused on engaging community, reporting with communities rather than just at them. And so that's what I was really passionate about. So I had an interest in criminal justice, and specifically the reentry part of criminal justice, people reentering society from prison. And my time at the J School, I realized, like through my reporting and research, that there was this untapped or underreported on community of formerly incarcerated women and the issues that they face reentering, which I feel like most of the focus was on men reentering society. And I found that they had a lot of issues, and one of them was housing. And so from doing my engagement work, just talking to people through online like sources like Instagram, Twitter, but also going to events and meetings, I found a woman named Topeka K. Sam, who she was a formerly incarcerated woman who created this transition home called Hope House that's located in Bronx. It's still up and running and doing great, where she helped her community transition back to society. And I was actually one of the first people to report on it. I found her on Instagram when she held up her keys and said she got the house, so I hopped right on that. And she's doing really great. And I actually followed up about a year and a half later, and did a report on her for Essence.com, just about her work and her legacy that she's leaving. So then after grad school, I was able to work with Spaceship Media, which I found out I learned about in the program. And they do a lot of dialogue journalism, it's called. And oh yeah, these are new people, they don't know. Okay, so they do dialogue journalism, which is bringing people into different community conversations. So that could be online or offline. And so I did a project called The Many, where and I work with Christine, we worked on this together, where we brought in women from across the country to talk about politics. But it was more than politics. It was about getting beyond the labels of politics, or liberal, conservative, and all of that. So I love engagement journalism. It's literally one of my favorite things to do. I love interacting with people and making sure that people are getting the stories that they need versus what the industry thinks that they need or what. So yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Lexi. All right, we are moving on to Isadora. So if you can tell us a little bit about your work in the program and also what you do now, that would be great.
Sure. Okay, so my name is Isadora. I'm from Rio in Brazil, which means I was one of the few international students in the class of 2019. Be more than happy to answer questions from international folks. I know how anxious we can all get. So right now I'm working as an engagement producer at Retro Report. They're a nonprofit that makes historical documentaries. They're on average 10 minutes long. And I am the first engagement oriented journalist they hire, which means they have a lot of expectations, but also they give me a lot of freedom to experiment, which is amazing. And it's also something that I really like to do. I did my share of experimenting during the program, and some would say that I went even like a little crazy during my summer internship and also with my practicum. So right now we're developing a new audience of educators. Like mostly Retro Report makes documentaries for like just news consumers who want to see what's like the history behind the headlines, right? Like something that's happening now, but what are the roots, what caused it? And they want to learn it like super fast in 10 minutes. So that's what Retro Report does. And they want to start serving the teachers community. They want to make their mini docs like easy to use by high school teachers and college educators. So that it was a fortunate but unfortunate timing with a bunch of schools going, not a bunch, all of them going, doing the remote learning, and so it was a good time for me to join the team and for us to kickstart this project. And I came with my engagement in mind of like, okay, you want to serve this community of teachers. We think a lot of things about the things they do and the things they need, but that doesn't matter. We need to hear from them what they need and what they want from us and how we can serve them. So, I mean, I did a bunch of things. I joined a bunch of Facebook groups. I put a bunch of call outs out there to try to learn from them how we could best serve them. And it's been very good so far. Trust building, it's a slow but steady process. And we learn a bunch about it in our community engagement class and other classes as well. How do you build trust with communities that don't really trust journalists or communities that are not familiar with the work of journalists? And they're the ones in the end that need like more help. Like they need us to look, into them and the issues, and so we can like accurately report on things. And I think now with everything that's going on, that's become like more evident, right? How do you report on the criminal justice system, on social justice, on like immigrant issues, and but we were doing that way before all of this blew up, so that's good. Like we're the first generation of engagement-oriented journalists, and I think we really have the power to change things with the way we think. Having a job as an engagement producer, that's my title. I'm working with all these like old school like journalists who worked for like 20-30 years in television, running like 60 minutes, and you come with your social J degree and you think you're not going to be able to add much to the conversation, but in the end like you're just like opening a door and a bunch of windows and letting light come in, and just like there's a whole new way of doing reporting and just bringing and developing your audience and making a relationship with them stronger in a way that you really serve them. So everything's been going so far. Today we sent out a new newsletter about, we put together a few videos that we have on civil rights movement that explain the origins of the civil rights movement. And I already got a response from some teachers saying that they loved it, they're gonna use it. And if you do, like, if you run newsletters, you know that that's like victory when you send out a newsletter, they open and they reply. Like, it's just like amazing. So hard to make people open emails these days. I think that's like that's what I've been doing. I've been also working with like trying to understand their audience and try to tailor content for each platform according to what their audience wants. Like, audiences are different in like depending on each platform, right? So people like following their Instagram, they do not want to see the same things that people following them on Twitter or Facebook. And news organizations are not really good at like, you know, picking those like subtleties. So I've been doing a lot of that, trying to figure out what their audiences want, what are the best content to put out. And I've been using practically all the skills that we learned during the program. And I don't know if you want to, if you want me to talk about what I did for my practicum, or if you have anything that you would want to know.
Yeah, I think it would be great if you were able to just discuss a little bit, because I think based on what you're saying, connecting with audiences and finding those ways to let the light shine in, you know, this picture here of the theater work that you did for the practicum, maybe just talking about that a little bit and giving people some insight into what you did.
Yeah, of course. So in the beginning of the program, we're all asked to pick a community that we want to serve, like an underserved, marginalized community. And being from Brazil myself and being a woman, I wanted to serve my community of immigrant women from Latin America. And I had a year to work on that, to report on them, like meet people, like trust, like build trust with sources. And in the end, we have to make it like, you know, our practicum, we have to develop a service or a product, something that helps that community to like get better informed, or you need to just like do something with them, for them, that helps them, or like addresses an issue they have. And as a journalist, you have the expertise and the tools to help them bring that information to them and change something there, which is like, I think it's what we all want, right? As journalists, this is what brought me to the program as well. Like, as a journalist, I was very, very unsatisfied with how, like, the path that I was taking. Like, I had no desire to go back to working at a newsroom in Brazil anymore. Like, the work didn't bring me any fulfillment. It felt very mechanic. I tried to work as a public relation, that didn't bring me any pleasure either. So I enrolled in a program, like trying to like find some meaning and see if I could do, as a journalist, like I could do some work that I would be proud of and I would help people. So I wanted to help the community of immigrant women. And what I realized was that, and that was like my big takeaway, the biggest takeaway from the program, is that when you're working with marginalized communities, the products, they're usually like traditionally associated to journalism, like, you know, I don't know, newspapers or a podcast or a documentary. That doesn't necessarily is going to help you communicate with them or inform them. So I ended up developing a chatbot and a forum play. So the chatbot, I had no experience in coding or anything. We had an amazing class on the third semester that was design and development, that we were introduced to a bunch of like super like user-friendly softwares that you could just like put a chatbot together. So I built a chatbot that gives information about domestic violence, and I developed a play with members of the community about domestic violence, and it was an interactive play. It follows a methodology in which you allow people from the audience to step in and replace the actors in their characters and try to change the outcome of the scene. And the play is always going to be about a systemic issue that the community is experiencing, right? So in my case was domestic violence. It was the pressing issue that I found that my community was facing, and they get, like, women get very isolated, and there's a language barrier. It's very hard to give them information. They're very ashamed. So it was like a hard community to reach out to. Podcasts wouldn't do, documentaries wouldn't do, like none of that would. So I came up with the theater and the chatbot. The theater, it ended up being very successful. I had opening night at CUNY. CUNY was super accommodating and let me use our only auditorium for like 2 months to like hold rehearsals that would run super late. And it was really funny, like seeing all these, like, you know, Brazilian people walking around, and some, like, most of them were actors. So it was very, very cool. So I did that, and we had an opening night. We had 70 people, which was a big surprise. And then we had a nonprofit wanting to take us to other places, other cities, in the state of New York. And we performed in Newark, New Jersey. We would go to Connecticut in early April, but then COVID hit, and then, you know, just like gatherings have been canceled until further notice. But we even performed at the Brazilian consulate, which is very uncommon thing to see there. They don't usually have events like these. So that's what I did. And it's not like I came into the program wanting to do something with theater or wanting to do something with, it's just what needed to be done. It was just what I identified that would work the best. So I just made a way to make it work, you know. And I think as journalists, like we usually put we prioritize what we want to do. Like, I want to make a podcast about this, I want to make a story about this, but when you're really trying to see how you can help a community, then you see that that's like the last thing that should not inform at all your work. Like, what works best for the community, that's what you should do.
Great, thanks, Isadora. And I think your work is such a great and interesting reminder that, you know, even though we are journalists and we are doing the work of writing stories, disseminating information, and creating videos and sort of the traditional things, there are a myriad of ways to connect with communities outside of those traditional types of content we can do. So I love that you did a theater production, and, you know, it just shows the possibilities of what we can do as students here. So thank you.
Yeah.
Great. And next up we have B. Hey, B. Hey. So tell us a little bit about your work that you do now at Reuters, and then also maybe a little bit of the work you did while in the program.
Cool, yeah. So I'm B. I graduated in December, so that was 100 years ago. I now am community engagement editor at Reuters, and we are a global news organization, so the challenge of doing engagement at a legacy news organization and at a global scale has been really fun and challenging for me. I'm on the social team, and I would say that our team has kind of approached these issues, COVID and the economy and the police brutality issue, kind of 3 ways. There's curation, community, and conversation. So curation is putting the news out on social. Reuters has this huge file, and it's a matter of putting it into a digestible format that readers can connect with and that's relevant to their lives. It's also asking them what topics they want to hear about. We did some stories that were based on reader questions, and really just listening to their needs. In terms of conversation, I started AMAs at Reuters. So that's, if you're not familiar, a Reddit format where users on Reddit, you get to ask someone anything for a period of time. And I've approached that in kind of two ways that have both been really fun. So one is having journalists answer questions from the public. So last week we had a reporter who had been covering the protests in Minneapolis go on a Reddit AMA and got a lot of super interesting questions, not just about, you know, what he had seen on the ground and what he had witnessed, but also on the craft of journalism, on, you know, how Reuters is protecting its journalists, and on how he thinks about media bias. It was this really exciting, dynamic conversation. And we also have brought on experts and sources in AMAs that Reuters kind of facilitates. So I like to think of it as kind of letting our audience interview our sources. So we've brought on, like, for example, during the height of the pandemic, we brought on the editor-in-chief of the New England Journal of Medicine, who had been looking at all of the scientific studies that had been coming out. It's like one of the most reputable scientific journals. And we just took out the middleman and let Reddit users ask this person all of their questions about COVID. And similarly, we got some of the most interesting stories and questions out of that. You can see we also started around the same time this Ask Reuters Twitter chat series. So we've done Twitter chats where we invite a group of people or a single person to come hang out on Reuters Twitter basically for an hour. And we've done them on topics like healthcare and unemployment. Tomorrow we have the author of the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, Ibram X. Kendi, as part of a series that we're putting together on race in America. So having these conversations around the news and, you know, bringing our experts directly to our readers in a similar way. What else? I've worked on this one thing that I'm really interested in doing at Reuters, but I'm just kind of dipping my toes into, is connecting our global audience to each other. And one way that I'm trying to do that is I'm doing this community-sourced quarantine cookbook. So collecting recipes from people who live in all different places across the world and then compiling them, not just as a way to, you know, discover new foods, but as a way to connect with other Reuters readers. And we've gotten a ton of responses. It's been really, really fun. That kind of lifestyle content, I think, has been really great for us right now. I also manage this virtual calendar of all of these events across the globe that people are holding virtually on lockdown. And I put it into GCal and iCal format too. So that's something we learned in the program about meeting readers where they are. And so by putting Reuters coverage directly into an app that is already on people's phones and that they're already using every day, might not seem like, you know, it's groundbreaking, but it is, you know, engaging them in a way that, you know, is creative and fun. So that's a little bit of what I've been working on right now.
Great, thank you so much, B. Do you want to say anything about the work you did while you were in the program, around incarceration and what you did with the Marshall Project?
Sure.
Even just the photo here.
Yeah, so I can talk about this project. I kind of had like a Russian doll community. I was working with people who are in American jails and prisons, people who are formerly incarcerated, and then their families. So this project was working with people who are currently incarcerated. I started crowdsourcing food diaries from people in American prisons, and did that just by, you know, kind of cold calling them using snail mail. Got a ton of food diaries mailed back. Used these primary sources kind of to do some visual storytelling on the Marshall Project. This is an Instagram story that had the food diaries and we had them illustrated. I put these into a database that I shared with researchers, and it was cited in a book. And I also made a zine. So we love zines at CUNY Social J, that I mailed out to the people who participated in the program that had food diaries from other people in prison. It also had resources on, nutrition. It had recipes. It had information on the rights of prisoners to have a healthy life. So that was a really fun project, and was one of like four, I think, like mini practicums I did.
I noticed the trend of cookbooks and food with you, B.
Yeah, I should just become a food writer.
But I love that you bring up too, and I think this is important to highlight, where you mentioned you collected these things just via snail mail, like sending this information and just collecting it in that way. I think it's a good reminder of that concept of like meeting the community you want to serve where they are. With so much being online, it's important to think too of how we can connect with communities in real life, not just online. So great example there as well. Thanks, B.
You're welcome.
Okay. And last but not least, we have Terry Paris Jr., who works at the city. He teaches a couple of the classes in the social journalism program, has quite the personality, and you'll meet him just now. So Terry, tell us a little bit about what you teach and the work that you do.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I think before I start, I think, you heard for the prospective students on this call, you heard a lot of meeting folks where they are, meeting the community where they are. And I think that's a great term. That's something that we say a lot. I think one of the things that I hope you see with all of these projects that they talked about, and actually, it's really great to meet folks where they are, and it feels really good, and it's a better way of doing journalism. But this is also incredibly creative. And this doesn't sort of lock you in a box of what journalism has been for 100 years. We're thinking about doing plays, and we're thinking about doing diaries, and we're using, all the different tools of bots and text messaging and crowdsourcing and diaries to try and get people to participate in journalism. And every semester and every student that joins the program is really incredibly creative and joins the program to try and think about journalism just a little bit differently, and sometimes a lot differently. And I think like that sometimes we're talking about listening, yes, and listening now more than ever. It's always been incredibly important, but I think we all believe that. I think now other journalists are starting to realize that. Meeting folks where they are, yes, but the creativity that students in this program are allowed to explore and brainstorm and work on, I think is unprecedented in a lot of journalism programs. It's not very, it can be an industry where you're supposed to do the thing that you were always, that has always been done. And this program very much kind of, throws that out the window and tries to start over again. And I think that's really, really important. And I think that's really exciting about what we try to teach at the, in our Social J program. Okay, so my name's Terry. I am the engagement director, which I really don't know what that means, at the city, to be honest. But I do a lot of different and weird stuff, and I do a lot of journalism. I was at ProPublica prior to this for 5 years and working on a lot of crowdsourcing projects, working on a lot of investigative projects, and figuring out ways and smarter and different ways in which people can connect to long-form journalism. I left that job because I thought it'd be a cool engagement project to work in New York City, as you know, and the project is New York City, and trying to get them to engage in any sort of information, which they do in various ways. And so that pulled me over to this job. I've been there for about a year. We're only a year old. And I've been able to do a lot of different and interesting and weird things, and some have been successful and some have not. I'll talk about a couple projects. One of them is a project that when I first got there, I feel that local news is not a conversation among the people that it's supposed to serve. And it's not always collaborative. And so I wanted the city, this new publication, a nonprofit news organization, to think about its community as having a seat at the table. And I wanted to partner with an organization that actually sort of walked the walk, and that was the Brooklyn Public Library. And the Brooklyn Public Library, any libraries are community, are institution, generally trusted institutions, hubs of information, hubs of conversation, hubs of community. It's all the best parts in a lot of ways of what I want a newsroom to be, and oftentimes newsrooms miss that mark. Sometimes we touch on a few things, and oftentimes we're missing them all completely. And I thought it'd be a great idea also to have a series of meetings, and I have a huge sort of distaste for journalism gatherings, because they often tend to be panels to talk about their work or to talk at communities, or sometimes just to have conversations for conversation's sake, and really have no sort of drive afterward to connect people to either each other or the information or any information. Now, conversation can sometimes be enough, but for me, I wanted to go a little bit deeper. And so we decided to partner for a year with the Brooklyn Public Library to hold at least 4 meetings in 6 different neighborhoods across the city. And, we were able to do half of that before COVID hit. And each meeting was not sort of to come in and see a singular thing. Each meeting, much like journalism or much like investigative journalism, was iterative. It built off the next, the next meeting built off the first meeting. And so we were able to create really structured conversations to get at the heart of what folks, at least folks in the room, were interested in working with us on. And so through the course of 3 and 4 meetings in some of these neighborhoods, and of varying degrees of types of questions and activities, as you can see up here in the top left-hand corner, is me on my knees, which was really, I'm 40 years old, and that was not a fun day getting up from that, and it's just getting worse. But so we do a series of activities and whiteboards and asking people very structured questions in small groups, and we're able to sort of elevate particular issues that the community wanted to work on with us. And we were able to do a handful of stories out of that. We weren't able to realize our full projects because of COVID. And so then we ended up shifting to do these virtually. And we've done 3 virtual open newsrooms now. And we are currently trying, and it's focused on COVID. And we have identified 10, is my time up? 10 different topics. And we're gonna explore those through the lens of COVID and through the lens of community, like rent and food, food security or insecurity really, unemployment, staying connected, caring for seniors, and grieving. These are all main topics that came up that we learned from the 40 people who came to our meetings. And we will end up, either shifting our coverage towards them or, and ideally working with them to develop something. And the interesting thing about this, and not that it is, again, it's not traditional, we're not sure what the output might be. The output might be a story, and we might write stories, but the output might be a guide, a series of guides. The output might be, one of the projects that we were working on prior to COVID was trying to tell the story of home ownership and loss in the Black community here in a neighborhood in Brooklyn. And it was with one of our 2020 students who is now in Milwaukee. And the idea that we were pursuing was not to write a story, but to do a series of 25 one-act plays and in front of various houses or at libraries about the various issues that these homes and their ownerships may have either succeeded or failed in retaining their home. Almost like the living newspaper, which was a thing back in the 60s or something like that, where we created the information through a narrative to try and get people to better understand what the resources might be, to participate in that, and to walk away with tangible ideas, experts, connections to either retain their home or make sure they're not scammed. So the open newsroom creates opportunities, much like the program, to be as creative as possible with distribution of information. So then COVID hits, and I often, you know, and I'll finish up in a second. You know, I feel a silver lining for the pandemic really was that everyone in the newsroom was like, I can't leave my house. How do I report? And I was like, I have about 1,000 ideas for you to do this. And I really believe that there was a moment in which engagement became a serious and integral tool and method for our newsroom to do reporting in a way that traditional reporters or even sort of curious reporters would never have really thought of, because they would have said, oh, I'm just going to go to my Rolodex, meet a person for coffee and write a story. But now I was like, look, I can find a way to get 800 people to tell us if they're commuting to work or not, which we were able to do, and then tell a bunch of stories out of that. And that was in part because from the beginning, we were building relationships with the community from the city, through the open newsroom, through other types of engagement crowdsourcing work, which basically is my entire career. And then when COVID hit, we were able to sort of pivot that or transition that into asking folks for all of the different types of crowdsourcing projects that we were working on, special education. We could pivot that to say, how is remote learning going for you? Or renting. We could pivot that to say, what sort of negotiations are you having with your landlord? Or how are you navigating rent if you're unemployed? So we were building this trust and relationship prior to this, and having the tools and skills to be able to reach out to folks, to find folks, to, you know, use Facebook or to use digital forums, to understand that we have to leverage networks, which reporters sort of understand, but not in the same way that I think social journalism and engagement journalism really does, is like finding ambassadors to help share your project, because reporters are really apprehensive of saying, hey, do you want to share this? We are very not apprehensive in saying, hey, could you do you see what we're doing? This lines up with what you think. Would you be interested in sharing it with your folks? And oftentimes they say yes. And then I'll say one final thing is that, or maybe two final things, is that we now are working on another engagement project around COVID to memorialize everyone, to try and memorialize 21,000 people who have died because of the coronavirus. And that's, you know, that's part data journalism and research, but really that is tapping into a real sort of moment right now in history for people who want to feel connected, who want to share, and who want to participate in something. The media oftentimes is the place that we look for remembrance, for validation. But oftentimes, and I would say a lot, obituaries are out of reach for a lot of folks, where the Daily News obituary is $600. Folks who are on SNAP benefits may not have ever been able to have an obituary before, to the point where they're not even thinking about it. But right now, when we've lost 21,000 people in this city, it is an important time to remember and try and connect that loss, a massive loss, with humanity and not just a number, right? All those fucking coronavirus trackers that every news organization has. Yeah, it's great. It helps me sort of like understand a graph is going up and down and if I can go out of my house. But what we forget is there are, you know, hundreds of thousands of families who don't give a shit about that graph. They just give a shit about their grandfather who was a taxi driver for 60 years and now died, and then their mother died, you know, 2 weeks later. And so and they weren't able to go to the doctor to hold their hand and like, you know, like participate in this idea of loss that we've always been trained to understand is like, I will hold my family member's hand there. So this is a massive, massive engagement project that for anyone that is in the 2021 class, I think that's what it's called, will most likely have an opportunity to work on. I want to say then that leads me to my last thought, which is that in my classes, in my class when my metrics and outcomes course that we have in the second semester, as I you know, co-teach reporting and the second class, we work on projects that where I'm in the newsroom. Whatever project I'm working on in the newsroom, I bring into the classroom. So at ProPublica, we worked on a handful of projects. And at the city, unfortunately, the project that we were going to work on got sort of shifted around because of COVID. and we had to pivot into this other sort of misinformation project. But when you come to the program and are participating in my classes, you will work on real world stuff at the city on real world projects, and most likely it'll be this COVID death tracking project. I was going to say one last thing, but I can't remember, so I guess I'm done.
Thanks, Terry.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, and just a final slide here, and I'll share these with you in a moment. I'll share the link to the Social J Medium page we have here, where we have a lot of information about what students have done, some of the different experiments that people have tried and used in newsrooms. You can see people's presentations from graduating classes where they sum up the work that they've done. So this could be a good resource if you're really looking to dig in and see what other people's projects look like as well. Also, just wanted to show you that we're not nerdy all the time, and we're a fun group here. We do social things as well. So great, thank you all for sticking with us. And now is the point where if you have a question for any of the fabulous alums, or for Terry or Carrie, and also Jeff Jarvis, one of our professors, is on here as well. Please let us know, and we're happy to stick around and answer questions.
Yeah, definitely. Anything you
Oh, did we lose Carrie?
We lost Carrie for a second, but yeah, any questions, any fears, trepidations, anything? I wrote a piece today saying that, this is Jeff Jarvis, I'm their colleague. This is the time to come to social journalism. I was asked by a prospective student whether you should wait a year, and I said, no, this is the greatest change. I'm old, and this is the greatest change I've seen in society, and this is the time to cover it. This is the time to be there. So any questions at all, please, we're eager to engage with anything you want to know.
Hi, I have a question. My name is Nick. How do you separate social journalism from activism?
Jeff, you can go if you want to, otherwise I will.
You go ahead, Carrie.
And then I'll go after the two of you.
Oh, all right. Yeah. Well, Terry, whatever you want to do. I mean, I think that I don't necessarily. I think that a lot of our ideas around objectivity, particularly thinking about it in a very black and white or rigid way, ultimately just goes to reinforce the status quo and the viewpoints of a lot of older white male editors. So, you know, I think that I think that some of our distinctions need to, at the very least, be thought about with more nuance. You know, this is something we grapple with and discuss like all the time in class. You know, we talk about fairness, we talk about, you know, listening to people, we talk about what, you know, what objectivity or what activism means in the very specific context around a given story or issue, because, you know, what feels appropriate or what might, you know, bring you the trust of your audience is a little bit different depending on what the issue is. One of my biggest answers is often transparency, you know, letting people make up their own minds what to think. But, you know, I really think that having kind of a knee-jerk black line between, you know, this counts as objective journalism and that over there is activism has gotten us into a lot of bad places as a field, and I hope we can do a little bit better with that. But it's a really good question. I mean, we talk about it like all the time. Terry, Jeff, you guys have anything you want to add, or anyone else?
Terry?
I mean, Jeff is going to say this so much more eloquently than I will. But I mean, like, I don't even know, like, what is the definition of activism? Is it you know, I often think of journalism as actually, you know, activism for truth, or activism with facts, or however you want to look at it. There is no sort of, like, if journalism when it's best has identified a wrong in itself and is going to try to right that wrong. I mean, is that the definition of activism? And then if that is, then yeah, I guess what is the difference between activism and journalism, Social J? Maybe there isn't a difference. I also feel that, look, systems that were established 175 years ago and still is sticking to those tenets of 175 years ago may have to fucking look at itself in the mirror and want to change. It's the same with the police. It's the same with everything. We can't stick, like, just fucking put our, heads up our asses and just hide behind this idea of objectivity, being afraid of saying what we feel and saying what we think and pursuing the things that we know to be wrong. Objectivity, or this idea of objectivity in itself, is like bonkers. Every decision that we make as a journalist is a manipulation. Every quote we choose to put in or not put in is a manipulation. So there is no such thing as fucking objectivity. There's no such, like, even today, like, I would say that, the work that we're doing with the Death Tracker is a form of activism, because we're trying to figure out who we are clearly pointing out that there are Black and brown folks who are not being counted. One, because they don't have access to obituaries. Two, because they don't have access to healthcare. And we want to identify those people. And we think this is wrong as a team, as an organization. And we are activists for trying to show folks and have folks and have people understand that there are gaps in what is happening, and we have to fill those gaps. I get really exercised by this question, and oftentimes I'm asked by sort of old white dudes, not Jeff Jarvis, but like folks who work on TV and shit like that, and it's just it like, take 5 seconds and let's be critical about who we are, what we do, because we are so critical of everyone else and not critical of ourselves. And then let's have that question. Let's talk about our coverage, and let's see if, like, our idea of, like, avoiding activism or trying to be objective has done any good in many communities across this country.
Brilliant. I said, I will only add that we are the heretics of journalism. You join Social J to reinvent journalism. And we grapple with these hard questions every day here. That's what we do. I have learned from every single student here, every single student in the program, as the students are the ones who are going to reinvent journalism. So it's a heavy responsibility, but it's a great opportunity. The other game we have is who can say more F words. Terry always wins, always.
Thank you.
More questions and challenges, please, and fears and trepidations and doubts.
Hi, I have a question if you can hear me. My name's Kat. I use she, her pronouns. My question is, how important is a specific focus within Social J, like photojournalism versus print versus audio? How important is having a focus? Can you have more than one? Do you need to know what that is when you show up? Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good question. We tend to de-emphasize a little bit the specific media platform, because we tend to start with the community first. So you really, so for example, you might decide for your final project that, video just makes the most sense for
Oh, hell, I'll pick up for Carrie until she comes back. You might decide to do video or audio or theater or whatever you want. That's less important than the community you serve and how you serve them. And you will learn the tools of whatever media you want. You learn a lot of tools of a lot of media. You'll learn how to make video. You'll learn how to make audio. You'll figure that out. But you can use it at your will as whatever is best for the community, as opposed to saying, oh, I'm an audio person. You can come out of the school and say, I love audio. I want to do podcasts. That's great. You can do that. But we do not pigeonhole you into media. Is that an answer, Kat?
It's exactly what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Well, good. More, please.
This
I'm
is
popping
not
in here. Go ahead. Yes.
this
Nick,
is
please.
this is not necessarily an education question per se. It's more for the alum. How did you, if you even did, work and go to school and support yourself financially? Because I know that according to the website, folks that go there do receive some financial support, mainly from families, but I doubt that everyone has a family that can help support them.
I can talk about it. I worked every semester, and it's absolutely doable to work every semester, even if they say they don't. Sorry. So you can have a job on the side, and if it's a journalism job, then all the better.
I worked during the program too, all 3 semesters. And I think the good thing about the Social J program, not that you should make your decision based on that, is that you're going for like the long game, right? You were not taking those reporting classes that every day you have to go out and every day you need to write a story and come back to the newsroom, type it out, like, you know, meet a deadline. You're given time to actually like develop your work. So you're not like running against time like the folks in the like doing the other tracks. So it's very doable for the Social J program. I'm not sure about the other programs at the J school.
Thank you.
Any fears
Any
or
other
concerns?
questions?
Yeah, or about
Yeah.
going to school at this time, given the uncertainty we can address.
Yeah, I have a question.
Please.
So right now my name is Asar, by the way. I'm a rising junior, and I'm currently at CUNY York College. And this upcoming semester, I'm planning on being editor-in-chief of our newspaper, Pandora's Box. And I'm just wondering, like, you know, what are some of the things that I should do in order to prepare for applying to the CUNY grad school in December of next year, just based off of where I'm at now?
I mean, it sounds like you're on the right path already. You know, it's great if, you know, it's not required that you have journalism knowledge coming in. Some of our, you know, smartest folks have not, but I mean, obviously it does help, because then you're kind of coming in with some background knowledge, just like about reporting and journalism writing. So that's fantastic. We really are looking for people that have a passion for this kind of work, because, you know, it's not easy. I think it can be tremendously rewarding, but it's challenging. So, you know, we're really looking for people that have, you know, maybe have experimented with this a little bit, or thought about communities that they really would love to serve, or that they feel like traditional media is not serving right. And yeah, we look kind of very holistically at everyone that applies. It's not any kind of one just specific thing that we're looking for, but I know that sounds a little bit corny to say passion for this kind of work, but that, you know, the people that are really successful, like many of the ones that you've heard from today, I mean, they got that way because this is truly something that that they love to do and they believe is important. So yeah, I don't know if anyone else has anything to add to that.
If not, that was a great answer, though. I do appreciate it.
Hi, my name is Stephanie. Carrie, thank you so much for addressing that. Actually, that's one of my personal questions, because I currently work in education education and work directly with communities and organizing, and seeing how the media, traditional media, doesn't really portray their stories. That's what I have been noticing about, and passionate about, like, hey, where are these avenues, and started researching and then found this program. So my question is really more geared towards the admission requirements, given if someone is pivoting from a different field, particularly my case would be education and community work. What does that look like for the admissions process, knowing that there's certain criteria that is necessary to submit?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great. We love that because, you know, in some ways it's easier to teach some of the more, you know, the writing kinds of skills and the reporting skills than it is, you know, the ability to kind of go out there and talk to and listen to people. So yeah, that's great. I mean, I know that, you know, we do ask for things like writing samples or clips, but, you know, I mean, that's like one piece of the overall application. I think that people in education, you know, I mean, part of your job is connecting with your students and communicating with them. You know, community organizers have a ton of overlaps with us. You know, we've had some students before with backgrounds in, you know, public health or anthropology that have done really well. Theater, people with theater backgrounds, like Diara, science and activism. There's a lot of different examples of that. And I think that that's great. I mean, I think that, and we also try, because there's not really a recipe for doing this kind of work. Like, I'm not teaching you, like, oh, if you just do these exact 5 steps in that exact order every time, it's going to produce the same thing. Like, that's not really how this works. Instead, it's kind of like we're all learning from each other, because something that really works for one community or one subject is going to be very different, you know, than in another community. So we kind of all sort of talk about that together and try to learn from each other. So yeah, I think that's great to have different kinds of backgrounds, and yeah, definitely feel free to email me anytime.
Thank you.
Great. Any last questions? Maybe one that you've been holding on to, a burning question. If not, maybe we'll wrap up if nobody has anything more.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for everyone for coming. I know the world is saturated with so many Zooms and other webinars and stuff that sometimes you're just like, make it stop. But I'm really grateful for that, and especially for our alumni and faculty for hanging out with us. So yeah, peace out and take care. Bye.